The views and opinions expressed on any program are those of the producers and/or the persons appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of FRC Media, Bristol Community College, or the City of Fall River.
Hello and welcome to Bristol Legal, where we bring you topics and conversations on legal issues which are relevant to your communities and you. I'm Elizabeth Nowakowski. I am the program chair and professor of paralegal and legal studies at Bristol Community College. Today on our show we have a guest, special guest, returning guest, District Attorney Thomas Quinn III. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me back. Nice to see you.
So we're gonna get the show going, and for starters, even though you've been on our show before, for those viewers that who may not have seen our shows before, would you mind reintroducing your office to us and tell us what your office does?
Sure. So I am the District Attorney of Bristol County and the Chief Law Enforcement Officer in Bristol County. We're responsible for the prosecution of crimes committed in the county. Charges brought by the police and charges initiated by our office. There are 4 courts in each major city. There are 4 district courts, one in Fall River, Attleboro, Taunton, and New Bedford. The majority of cases are handled there. The more serious cases where there is no jurisdiction in the district court, and in some cases joint jurisdiction, are prosecuted in Superior Court. Murders, rapes, drug trafficking, violent crimes of that nature. So we are responsible for prosecuting those cases. There are thousands of cases brought each year in Bristol County. Been a little bit of change with COVID and the aftermath, but we're charged with that responsibility that we take very seriously.
Thank you so much. And your office does even a little more than that, right? So your primary sort of mandate or goal is to prosecute crimes, but you get involved in the community, you do crime. Can you tell us a little more beyond the traditional prosecution that the DA's office is usually associated with? What else does your office do?
Well, our office is very involved in the community. Really, we were doing it beforehand, but since then, getting into the schools is important. There are a lot of issues that have developed, with the use and abuse of social media and other things. So I have been to a number of schools this year, speaking along with other members of my staff. We, again, present in other community events. I've focused on at-risk youth, so we assist in various ways with that, whether it's relating to prevention. My big initiative, starting almost 9 years ago, was creating an elder fraud unit, focusing on the prosecuting crimes against the elderly, but just as important, prevention. So I have been out along with staff to every senior center and other senior facilities in the county numerous times talking about prevention. There are thieves and scam artists everywhere. They're trying to take advantage of everybody, but in particular seniors with various scams. So we have spoken about how to prevent those things. I've, again, created really a unique elder fraud unit that focuses on prosecuting crimes against the elderly and also other financial crimes. So that's been a huge initiative that's been very successful. So it's a presence in the schools, putting on some athletic clinics has been done in the past, and other initiatives related to prevention throughout the county.
Do you think as the AI is coming around, or actually it's very much the artificial intelligence and all the tools that come with it, which could be great in so many ways, it seems that it opens doors in the future for making these crimes even more, I don't know what the word is, I don't want to say easier, but
Yeah,
they
people are
sound
more susceptible
because they make it more real
because
to
of the
those.
yeah.
So how do you think it's going to make your job and other prosecutors, including federal prosecutors, harder, or is it just?
I do.
Yeah.
I think that's a big concern in a very simple way. Artificial intelligence, from my perspective, is artificial. And we've had cases where voices are used in schemes or an attempt to hurt somebody, which is very concerning.
Yeah.
We've heard one of the scams is a grandparent scam, in which we've heard now recently that they're trying to dub or manufacture the voice, or if they're not manufacturing it, utilizing it from social media, where it's the actual voice of a grandchild saying, I'm in jail, I need help, I've been in an accident, when in reality it isn't the child calling, but the artificial application of intelligence to scam people is a big concern. And there are instances we've heard of it, something that the society has to be very wary of.
Yeah.
Because I'm concerned on a number of fronts with technology and social media. It's been very important, and it shows the advancement of technology, but it's being used in many negative ways now, and we're trying to address that in the schools through the elderly in different ways.
It's that is so true. I have a friend who works in a compliance department for a bank, and she told me a few months ago that she is adamant about anyone in her family not put any voice on social media if possible, because of exactly that, because of what she's seen in the bank on the AML side with people, elderly taking money out because someone used the voice that they found on social media, or maybe AI, whatever the case.
Yes.
So I think it's hard to do with the younger, but I think it's definitely a caution that we need to continue to talk about. Be careful what you put on social media, things that we didn't really talk about before.
Well, it's a psychological game,
Yeah.
a lot of this, especially going after senior citizens, startling them with, just a call saying your grandchild is in jail. That scares a lot of people. That can cause them to react maybe not in a rational way because they're scared and concerned for their grandchild who they love. But technology, there are unfortunately many negative aspects that are coming to the forefront now.
Yeah, you're going to be busy, unfortunately, on that front. In terms of your office, and I'm not sure, I'm not looking for a concrete number, but compared to other DA and the other counties in Massachusetts, is there like a database where we look, where you compare the number of prosecutions by capita or somehow? I'm just curious, like whether there is one county that's busier than the other, and how do we compare in terms of the rest of the states? Or maybe it's really every county is unique and it's not relevant.
Well, I think it's relevant potentially to resources, or not potentially, in fact.
Yeah,
so clearly some counties are more busier than others. It depends on the demographics. Boston is busy, that jurisdiction. You have Middlesex County is a very big county. Bristol County has always been a very busy county. There's 4 cities. There are serious crimes that are committed throughout the county. There are statistics that are put forth as to, you can document how many homicides have occurred, how many arrests, and that is a factor in terms of resources because demands are made on us increasingly in different ways, and statistics reveal that. But I don't know if there's a database per se that you could say, well, this county, had 100 sexual assaults, or this county had 200, or this county had 5. But clearly, there are smaller counties, especially ones without the urban areas.
Yeah.
The urban areas generate a good amount of the crime. So there are some comparisons that are realistic.
Yeah.
It may not tell the whole story, but clearly it's, really the number of charges that are investigated and or filed totally or in a particular area. Bristol County's always been busy on every front. There's been, a lot of domestic violence cases, children, child abuse, violent crimes. So we're a busy county. and you need adequate staff now to deal with the issues that come up on a day-to-day basis.
So what do you think is the biggest challenge that faces, from your perspective, the Bristol County, or is it the state, or is it just our county? Is there anything unique to us, or maybe it's just the same for everyone in the state?
Well, I think every county can be different in its own way. I mean, I think the goal is to fairly prosecute cases based on the facts and circumstances of each case. I think there's some concern as time goes by. There's been issues with how people view the police over the last few years, and in some cases, in some departments, the numbers are down. We need an adequate number of police to protect the public and to properly police communities. So we'll see how that goes. I think that having adequate staffing in the police departments and having people have a appropriate fact-based view of how the criminal justice system works. And also, I think, things go on with personnel and resources, pool of applicants, et cetera, as we move forward. So there are potential challenges ahead, but the bottom line is we are trying to do the best job we can to fairly administer justice on each case-by-case basis. And balance the various concerns, balance, the facts of a case, the background of a person charged. The vast majority of people aren't constantly in the criminal justice system. It might be one time. You've got to view those cases in that light, have consideration for people. I don't want to see somebody have a record who doesn't have to have a record, if that could hurt them during their career, if we all make mistakes when we're young. But there are violent individuals and habitual criminals that have to be dealt with and taken off the street, and that's been a priority of mine, to have balanced prosecution, and hopefully the resources from law enforcement and in other areas are there.
Yeah, so it goes back to, we mentioned earlier about education. So educating people about criminal justice system goes back to civic education, which is missing in schools today. So you being in the schools, I think it's a great thing, because I don't think there is enough of that.
I think that's a very good point. I think there has to be more basic education. I mean, we want the system to work the best it could. I mean, the way I say to people, do you want the system to operate fairly if you or a family member were charged with a crime? What are you going to say? No? Yes, of course. But we don't need it to be that personal. That's how I want it to work. Each person who presents themselves is a human being and is entitled to fair treatment. That can be debatable what it is. Extreme positions either way aren't something that you are going to have on a day-to-day basis. So it's being informed and of the realities of the justice. I mean, I think our system in Massachusetts is fair. I mean, nothing's perfect. You could always debate some inequities, but I think I've been involved in the criminal justice system for a long time now, over 35 years, and I don't see injustices occurring, but we have to see, adapt to how things occur, if things change on the society. But I think more education and a realistic assessment of that the criminal justice system is fair and functions adequately. I mean, again, we can all have change in certain areas, but I think misconceptions of unfairness or poor treatment should be brought out if they're not accurate.
Yeah. And you mentioned police earlier, plea agreements, for those who may not be aware. I usually tell my students that most of cases don't go to trial, right? We don't, even if we wanted to, we don't have the capacity to try every single case. I assume you're not involved in every single plea agreement that is happening?
Fair assumption.
With the 4 courts, well, actually 4 court districts, because we have more than 4.
Oh, actually, yeah.
We have 7,
I guess.
Courts, you got juvenile, so you really
right.
have a lot of geography to cover. So in terms of the plea agreements, some of my students always wondered how, who is involved and what are, if you can speak to it, of course, like how is that determined? Like what goes into a decision that the plea may be offered and is the appropriate way to go?
Well, in simple terms, it's based on the circumstance of the case. Cases fit a pattern, but each case and each individual is unique. So basically you start with, what are the facts of the case? Okay, how serious is the charge? Is there sufficient evidence to prove it? I mean, generally there should be when a complaint's issued, but probable cause to bring a complaint is different than beyond a reasonable doubt to convict. So you have to evaluate one's record. How old are they? What are they doing in life? What's the charge? Are there weaknesses in the case? Are they habitual criminal? So those are the things you have to determine. Ultimately, in most cases, it's up to a judge what happens, unless there's a mandatory sentence. So let's say 90% of the cases, a huge percentage, are up to a judge. So we can make recommendations, but ultimately it's up to a judge. If there is a minimum mandatory sentence that has to be imposed, then there's nothing a judge can do about it with respect to that, at least imposing that minimum mandatory sentence. So you need people to have experience, to have a fair-mindedness about them in trying to deal with these situations. But it's not a magic formula. It's, is a person amenable to rehabilitation? Again, that's going to be based somewhat on their record. And people make mistakes. I'm sensitive to that. I've given a lot of people consideration, or if you want to say breaks, over the years. But some of these cases, people who are repeatedly hurting women with domestic violence, sexual assault, violent street crimes, firearms, those cases impact public safety, and those people have to be, if warranted based on the facts and circumstances, taken off the street.
Thank you so much. Now, I want to change gears a little. There was some news recently about a cold case that your office has solved. I know we probably don't have that. We could probably do just a show about that. But could you just highlight, how many cold cases do we have? Do we have a unit? Do we have a person? Or do we just deal with it as things come up? Because we are, we're not a big city, DA's office. So if you could just talk about that generally, that would be great.
Well, we have a cold case unit that has been headed by Deputy DA Bill McCauley, who actually is retiring today. I want to mention him, I've worked together with him for 17 years. Part of his duties, he specialized in cold cases under DA Sam Sutter. He got involved in a number of cases that he solved and charged, and has continued to do that in my office. We've expanded into focusing on unidentified remains in which foul play could be involved, and unidentified bodies as part of our cold case unit. So we have solved and charged a number of cold cases. Also, including through our rape kit initiative, testing. There were a number of thousands of untested rape kits over the years. We applied for a grant, got all our cases tested, brought charges in several cases. We solved a cold case we solved the cold case of a sexual predator in the late 90s in 3 communities, 2 in Bristol County. His name was Ivan Keefe. That was some of the most brutal cases I've seen, but that was a cold case sexual predator, horrible cases. So through advanced use of DNA, genealogical DNA, and a lot of hard work, he was arrested, charged, and got 50 years in prison. I highlight that just to point out that we've had some good results. We identified the remains of an individual by the name of Keith Olson. He was reported missing in, I believe it was Warwick, Rhode Island, in April of '81. Was seen being escorted out of his home by 2 men. 4 years later, remains were found on the side of 195 off of the roadway, and the remains were collected. Good work was done at the time. Technology was limited. They created like a cast molding based on the skull, the bones that were found in the skull, to see if he could be identified. He couldn't. We've examined approximately 95 cold cases going back 50 years, approximately 50 years. So we have a list of them, and we are working on those, and one of them was that case. That case was ruled a homicide. Further investigation again revealed that Olson was involved with a woman who had been involved with another man, last name Broccoli. There was some appeared to be bad blood over the, Olson being involved, and he was seen being escorted with the 2 men. Broccoli is dead, but point being, that's a case we've reviewed, we've identified it, met with the family. They're grateful that we put the effort in to identify his remains. The case is open, but Broccoli is deceased, who would be a suspect in the case. And that's an example of what we've done. We also identified the remains from a Fall River landfill in 2005. An individual, remains were found. Eventually, through DNA testing, determined the person was from Boston and buried in Fall River. Matters being investigated. So those are several examples that we have been able to identify unidentified remains that are part of potential cold cases, or at the very least, the family will know that their loved one has been identified. So Bill McCauley has overseen that, done a great job. We have other people involved. That will continue on. We have matters under investigation. And we just want the public to know we're not promising we're going to solve all these cases. We're going to put the effort into reviewing them and determining if, with technology and following up on people who maybe didn't come forward, that we could bring some closure to the family.
I think it's wonderful that you have a unit dedicated to it, and it's also wonderful that you can bring closure to those families that have been waiting for so long. Even if even any information is probably a great news to deliver. Now, speaking of families, your office also has a unit or a department or area that helps or helps witnesses and victims. Thank you. Could you speak about that, and how is that unit involved, and in which situations that department gets involved?
Well, we have victim witness assistants operating in each court, the 4 district courts and Superior Court, to assist prosecution with the victims of crimes and witnesses in cases. There are many of them. The staff has grown over the years. We have each district court is staffed by a number of victim witness advocates, as is the Superior Court. They are a bridge, if you will, between the prosecution and the victim or witness. Many of these cases involve significant trauma being inflicted on victims, child abuse cases, homicides, dealing with family members. So they provide a great assistance in keeping, as is required by law, keeping victims notified of what's going on in court proceedings. Unfortunately, some don't cooperate, and working with many of these witnesses, some who end up out of state, to inform them of the process, what's going on, try to calm them down if they're upset. So they provide a great service that's very important as part of our prosecution team, so I'm grateful for their efforts.
Yeah, that's such an important part of the criminal justice process, because we can't even imagine what these families are going through. And so many people may be afraid and scared to come out as a witness, right?
Absolutely. They're afraid, and just in general. I mean, if somebody's house is broken into and they said, well, we want you to come into court, most people don't want to do that. They'd be apprehensive about it. So you need somebody to talk to them and to calm them down. Some people don't want to come in, but they have a legal obligation too if they've been served with a court process. So they do a very good job. They can be very difficult at times because you're dealing with all types of different people, their emotions, their issues, their feelings, and we need them to cooperate to try to bring justice in these cases. So it's a very important role.
Thank you. Your office, and so do many, unfortunately, and across the state and the country, has dealt with some high-profile cases over the last, I would say, few years, but it seems like it was longer. But there's always others. What are the biggest challenges? So what is when you have those cases where your office is always in the news, and I know Plymouth County lately had similar, bunch of cases like that. And along with that, I was also curious if the DAs from other counties in the state work with each other in any way. So it's sort of like a two-part question.
Well, I mean, with respect to the high-profile cases, generally speaking, every county or jurisdiction at some point is going to have that. You never know how things happen. I think the challenge that brings with it is that if there's a significant media interest, that can be a distraction. The media could be covering the case, they could be looking for information, which is what their job is and appropriate, but the prosecution team needs to stay focused. We had recently, there was a Michelle Carter case. She, was convicted of assisting in the death of a boyfriend. Huge media interest. You need to stay focused, the prosecution team, because you can get caught up in it. You don't want anybody trying to do things maybe they ordinarily wouldn't do, whether it's trying to play up to the media or losing their focus or being concerned what is being portrayed or shown outside. That can be dealt with by other people. So it's really the focus. I mean, Hernandez in particular is a very long trial. I get appointed DA. A couple of days later, I'm standing there. There's 20 reporters in a room downstairs, and that's my first matter really to deal with, which is ironic. But I've got to try to deal with the media in an appropriate way. You can't provide information. A lot of information can't be provided because there's a trial, but you also want to be helpful if you can because they're trying to do their job. But the team needs to stay focused, and there needs to be myself or in my case, in our office would be Greg Milioti, needs to be a buffer because many high-profile cases can go the wrong way, and we've seen that in court, and maybe not just because of the evidence, arguably the O.J. Simpson case and other cases where it appeared the evidence was strong, whether there was a media impact or not, who knows. But need to stay focused, especially the longer the trial, on the evidence and presenting it the way we want to present it, and not let the media be a distraction. Because a lot of things come up. The Hernandez case was an issue with the jurors, and was somebody following them in the bus. I mean, that brought to the court's attention. And so you just need to stay focused so you're not distracted, focus on presenting the evidence, and that's what was done very well by our prosecution team in both of those cases.
Do you think you've been practicing in criminal law for a long time? We don't have to go into how long, right?
Thank you.
A few years. Do you think it must be harder and more challenging to be on either side with social media being part of the equation now? I mean, I assume it's beneficial to a certain extent because some people make mistakes on social media. So maybe it makes it easier to some extent. But on the other hand, when we're talking about those high-profile, not prosecuting, right? But when we're talking about the high-profile cases and the impact that may have on the prosecution, and jury selection and all that, it must be so much harder to find people who never heard of the case or stuff like that.
Yeah, yes and no about hearing about it. The issue is probably more once they're selected. Someone could have heard of the case, but they've drawn no conclusion. But once they're selected, with people carrying their phones everywhere, are they communicating during the day? Are they looking stuff up? That never existed before. Things happen, but so it is more of a challenge, and issues come up during a trial. Just with social media, there was a recent case from New Bedford, a murder prosecuted, in which it was a gang-related killing, and the witnesses, some of the gang members were in court with phones taking pictures of witnesses, and so that's another social media component. In the past, they couldn't do that. They could sit there and maybe try to intimidate them, but taking pictures. So it's a challenge and a problem in the court system because it can bring in extraneous information into a case that is not relevant to the case. So it's a concern, although in another level briefly, but the use of technology in some cases, the use of cell phone technology, locating people, surveillance cameras, DNA has been extremely helpful in solving cases that in the past would not be solved.
Including the cold cases that we've
Cold
mentioned.
cases, shootings now that can be charged, not all fatal. It's still the same thing.
Yeah.
You shoot somebody. Sadly, some people die, but some don't. We have evidence in which we've gone forward and got convictions that we never would have gotten years ago.
Yeah, so there is technology. We need to embrace it with caution and be careful. The last question I have is, can you tell us how many employees do you have in DA's office? Because that includes support staff and not just prosecutors. So how many people work for you?
Well, I mean, it varies. We have, I would say, it depends how you want to go. I'd say, you know, around 140 if we have a state police unit. So that's, you know, around 20 so people. So I mean, there's about 140 people, 130. So the staff has grown over the years, but so have the needs. And, you know, there's a lot more technology-based cases. So it's a big operation. And it's, you know, 4 district courts, a superior court. Juveniles who are under, you know, anybody charged with a crime under the age of 18. There's a juvenile court in each district court. Yep. Some juveniles can be charged as adults. So, you know, it's not like it was when I started, not that that was, you know, 60 years ago, but it was just different. And the complexity of the cases have increased because you didn't have the technology. Yeah, but that means cases weren't solved. So that list of unsolved homicides, many of those would have been charged if they were committed today.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to thank you for being here. I wanted to thank your entire office for keeping our county safe. And till next time, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for watching.